Hello, it's time for Stories for the Heart, and today I thought I would read some selections from this book called Stories and Recipes of the Great Depression of the 1930s. And I bought this book when I was on vacation with my husband in Wisconsin, and we were touring a cheese factory, no less, and this was just sitting on one of the shelves in the gift shop portion of the factory. And so I've always been very intrigued and interested in learning about the Depression era. And so I picked this up, and I've enjoyed looking through it. It's got really neat recipes from that time and how people were frugal and used what they had. Didn't have a lot, and so they had to really think outside the box and make things that they had work for, make things stretch and go farther, and turn things into other things, use things for other reasons than what they were originally intended for. So I'm going to go ahead and read you a few selections from this book. The first one that I'm going to read is called Where Did the Money Go? Farms around Lake Elmo, Minnesota were ideal for raising strawberries. Rain in the 20s could generally be depended upon to keep the sandy soil moist for growing huge, sweet berries. There was a good market for the berries, and it made an excellent side crop for the farmer as well as for his kids. They earned 2 cents a quart for picking it, and it was the money that kept young Arndt Jensen picking every day for 5 weeks straight, and sometimes longer. He valued his earnings and put it all into savings at the bank in his name. The berries were picked to coincide with cream hauling to town so as not to make an extra trip. The berries were exchanged for groceries which were stored for winter use. Arndt, as a young boy, was a good, steady picker and a thrifty money saver. He was already looking ahead to his future. He wanted to be successful and knew that began with a bank account. He was proud of his efforts when he had saved $100. It was meant to stay there and grow until something very worthwhile came along when he was older. In the late 20s, there were rumblings of the money market beginning to be unstable. No one thought for a moment that it wouldn't settle down. By the fall of 1929, it became a worry, and in October, on a Friday, the banks closed all across the nation, one after the other. You couldn't reach any bank by phone, and there was no answer to knocks on the doors. The signs emphatically said, "Closed." No explanations given. There was no one to talk to about it. It was a horrendous shock people had great difficulty dealing with. Many bank presidents were even shot. Arndt Jensen lost every penny he had saved picking 5,000 quarts of berries. He never saw any part of his money again. It was a hard lesson to come to terms with, and a severe blow to a young boy who had trust in our leaders. And this was actually written by Arndt Jensen from Menominee, Wisconsin. And I'm pretty sure I did not say that right, but anyway, we gave it our best shot. Eva White remembers the time when her family had a dire need and money had to be withdrawn from the bank. She recalls her mother walking to the village with the bank book. When she got there, the door was locked and a sign starkly read, "Closed." Men were huddled on the street, sharing their fears of what the future might yet bring now that their money was mysteriously taken from them. This young mother came home without the much-needed supplies and with the shockingly bad news. To worry and confuse the people further, they were never told who had the money that was in the bank or where it went. And this was submitted by Eva White from Cornell, Wisconsin. This one is titled Need Brought Out the Best in Us. It was also a time in our ecologically uncertain environment when nature was not in harmony with man, when the earth, which we had not only had counted on but taken for granted, failed in producing the foods we needed to survive on. It didn't rain much anymore. We didn't think it could happen, especially not year after year. Like never before in history, when the supply became seriously short, it was the women who were left holding the empty bag. Meals still had to be prepared for unbelievably large families, while babies came in spite of everything and the food supply dwindled. It was truly a time when it was up to the women to hold it all together at home. You hunkered down and made it work. If you didn't know it before, it became necessary to learn how to make every spoonful count. And out of this necessity, women became profoundly skilled at the art of thrifty homemaking. Never before or since has so much been expected of the cook, unless it was the early pioneers. In growing up, the children learned from these mothers, believing this was a normal way of life, since few had it different. It was, as it turned out, the best education anyone could ever hope to acquire. No matter what else one did in life after that, knowing how to manage an efficient kitchen and home made everything else go better. Kitchen and home made everything else go better. Children also learned that waste was strictly taboo. It was a crime against the family or anyone else for that matter, since there was always someone out there needing it. Respecting one's resources was the rule. Whether it was a paycheck or other material possessions, one was expected to handle it intelligently and with care. Thus, it was with everything, and particularly with the available supply of food. And of course, vandalism was unheard of and would not have been tolerated. In a rare case of willful destruction, absolute restitution was expected and enforced, beginning with the parents in authority. It was a nice, clean time to grow up. Wise parents instilled these values and virtues in their children as a way of life. It gave each member a place in the family unit with obligations to each other. Loyalty was a paramount virtue, with parents setting the example. Sisters and brothers looked out for each other at home and away from home. It was a good, comfortable feeling which lasted a lifetime. The large size of the families gave a substantial umbrella of security and experiences to draw from. Fortunately, lessons of wisdom from that era live on. Man has always relied on knowledge acquired through experiences of previous generations. If we were to make all our own errors, life would not be long enough to make them all, and it would be a lifetime of aimless frustrations filled with defeat and failure. This was called Life in the Fox Shacks. Wisconsin people came to depend on the paper mills for their livelihood. It was work. Even though the pay was not good for the long hours of hard work required of the men, it added up if it was steady. But gradually it became obvious that orders were slowing down considerably and the mills had to reduce their production. The heavy construction material manufactured at the mills and used for building wasn't in demand anymore. Likewise, people couldn't afford other paper products any longer, such as newspapers and magazines. Even schools used the same textbooks year after year. Children had to handle them carefully, or the parents had to pay for them. Manufacturing companies using paper products had the same problems that the mills had. Orders were not coming in. The demand wasn't there. It was a lonely, frightening feeling, not knowing what was going on. And that kind of mirrors the situation that we're going through today with this virus going around. We don't know, we can't look into the future and see what's coming, but we know that we can trust our God to take us every step of the way. It says, consequently, paper mills had to cut hours to the bone, giving workers hardly enough pay for the monthly rent on the Fox Shacks. The shacks were constructed primarily of wallboard and were built for employees and their families as living quarters. They did not get their name from the abundant population of wildlife so numerous in the wooded river valley. It so happened the guru who owned and masterminded the plant operation was named Fox. The shacks were warm enough for the cold Wisconsin winters, but they were always too small for a family. And families had a way of growing year after year. All the while, women had an ongoing battle with bed bugs these paper shacks housed. It was a natural habitat for the bugs, and it was next to impossible to keep them under control. Oh no, that would not be fun. At least the men earned enough pay to pay for the housing, and most realized how fortunate they were. It was a fact of the times that in other areas, people were known to have been driven out of their homes with nowhere to go. Most families had a cow, and except for the years when it didn't rain, they always had large gardens with huge potato patches. A family could live off of a garden all summer long and still have enough left preserved for the cold months ahead. Food poisoning from preserving was rare, even though all canning was done with the boiling water bath method. The real food culprits were the warm pantries. The summer complaint was common, which resulted from lack of refrigeration. The cellar floor or well pit kept foods cool, but the pantry shelves were used for keeping many dishes for the next meal or day. The cow produced milk, which provided an enormous amount of food besides the large pitchers of milk on each table at mealtime. There were puddings, soups, cheeses of all kinds, and now and then some butter. Although cream was a cash crop and had to be skimmed off and sold at the grocery store for badly needed cash, some usually was allowed for the family as a treat. Lard often replaced butter for bread because there was plenty of it. Chickens were literally sent from heaven to help people through the hard times. They too produced an income, even when eggs sold for as little as 9 cents a dozen. You could buy quite a bit of sugar and bread for baking for that amount. It had added up and provided other necessities like coffee, hand soap, or a tin of Prince Albert for Dad. Not to mention the many meals one could make out of eggs. Sometimes entire dinners when meat was not available. At times when feed was hard to come by, the chickens kept busy scratching for bugs and catching grasshoppers, oblivious to the ration shortage, and they kept on laying their fresh eggs. Then, for all of this, when they were too old to lay eggs any longer, they ended up providing the best pot of chicken and dumplings in the world. So thank God for chickens. On a Sunday, you might enjoy popovers made with eggs and a bit of whipped cream Father allowed for this day. There was so much a mother could do to keep the family in good spirits if the outside world gave you a lemon. It sometimes was very hard, but she expected it of herself, and she came through. The Great Depression war was won in her kitchen, and there's no doubt about that. This one is called Proud Appearances. It was a time when scruffy clothes were not popular. The people of the 30s were proud, and they would struggle hard to make it look good so as not to give away the depth of their poverty. Clothes were carefully brushed, washed, starched, and ironed to make them look their best. Many were down to the last dress or the pair of trousers. Doris Fee made certain that her only dress was all-purpose. Her basic, dark-colored sheath had sleeves and a slash at the neck. Being fashion-conscious in a bankrupt world required creativity. Like everyone else, she raided the family scrap bag for materials to make collars and cuffs, dickies, jabots, belts, sashes, scarves, peplums, etc. Crocheted accessories were in, and competing with others for design and creation was a big part of the innovative style of the day. It brought out talents that you didn't even know you had. This was by Doris Fee of Hillsdale, New Jersey. Shopping in LA in 1930s. It says, we had mail order catalogs. In fact, the catalogs took care of 99% of our shopping needs. And that just kind of reminds me of today. A lot of people aren't going to stores, and so they are shopping online and ordering things off of the internet. So a little similarity there. You didn't go to the county seat any more than was necessary. When you did go, you packed a lunch, usually jelly sandwiches, because it was an all-day trip. You had funds only for the barest necessities, so shopping as such was a rare occurrence. For this reason, when the new spring and fall catalogs came out with new styles and items, it was an occasion for excitement. There were several catalog companies, all of which sent a free catalog each season. Of course, if you didn't buy anything for a number of years, they took you off the list of free mailings. There were Sears and Roebuck's Company, Montgomery Ward, and the M.W. Savage Company. They sold almost anything anyone could ever need, including the house, and with everything needed to build it, right down to the last doorknob. Also the furnishings, the insurance policy to protect it all from any peril, and all clothing that the family would wear. Goods were all made in the United States, and you could count on everything being well made with no cause for returns. The manufacturer's reputation was at stake. No catalog had anything listed that was sold by another catalog. It made for a great shopping at home. It could take several weeks to come up with a decision since you had to look through all the catalogs. Montgomery Ward catalog sales were almost too good to pass up. If somehow you could find the money, it bought quite a lot. For $2 a bundle, you could get many pieces of fabrics in all lengths and widths and colors. It was enough to sew shirts and dresses for the family for an entire year. $2, wow, can you imagine that? There was also the National Bella's Hess catalog with its beautiful clothing. It wasn't often that you could afford to order things from there, but you would examine the dresses and copy the styles using recycled old garments or material that you could buy cheaper. That's being very resourceful. Create your own patterns from copying what they have in the catalog. But the Spiegel May Stearns catalog, with its unique merchandise, changed America's buying habits for all time. They pioneered in credit buying, with payments to be made in monthly installments. Give me a second here. I gotta fix the lighting on my phone. There we go. I'm so sorry for the interruption. But the Spiegel May Stearns catalog, they pioneered in credit buying with payments to be made in monthly installments. This system became overwhelmingly popular overnight because about this time many people had hit rock bottom. With the drought having devastated the farmers and no jobs of any kind to be found, living conditions became a serious worry. Things were wearing out with no money to replace them and no relief in sight. The poorer you became, the more you were embarrassed by it, since this had never been your way of life before. With the Spiegel catalog, you could now replace the most necessary worn-out items and pay a small monthly payment. In time, it would be yours. Your attitude changed about everything. Everything was beginning to get better now, for sure. But you didn't want anyone to see that Spiegel catalog that was being used in your house. It meant you were charging goods. This too was embarrassing. So you kept the catalog out of sight. You could buy as long as your credit was good. Missing a payment only once was bad for your rating. If your name ever would have been listed with a collection agency, you were blackballed for life. It would be cash and carry forever for you. And so so you made sure it would never happen to you. Before long, Sears and Montgomery Ward were joining the plan, and credit buying became a way of life. The last one I'm going to read is $6 Bought Everything. In most cases, buying new clothes was the least of our worries. We wore what we had. Business for mail order companies had dropped so drastically that companies were coming up with new gimmicks to generate sales and to lure people into buying. Buck Stallsbush saved his money, and when the catalog came out, offering an entire outfit of clothes from head to toe, hat, shoes, belts, and socks for only $6 plus 15 cents postage, he was ready to order. Measurements had to be exact from the head size down, including the neck, waist, arm length, trouser, inseam, belt size, shoes, and hose. When the package arrived, every item fit perfectly. Buck wore his handsome new outfit only once before he was called into service for his country. Several years later, when he came back, he expected to find his new clothes waiting for him in the closet where he had left them, but everything was gone. Others in the family had grown into the new clothes and made good use of them while he was wearing his military uniform. And there says there's a photo on page 32. This is Buck Stallsbush in his $6 mail order outfit. I don't know if you can see that very well or not, but he looks very handsome and dapper. It's hard to believe that $6 would buy a complete outfit like that for a man, especially. Okay, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you the next time for Stories for the Heart. Have a great day.